Hello, everyone. I'll give you a moment to connect to sound here. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1256th New Social Environment. I'm Joshua, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Hank Willis Thomas and Emann Odufu. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Hank Willis Thomas is a conceptual artist whose work addresses identity, perspective, media, and the construction of collective memory. Originally trained as a photographer, his practice now spans diverse media, including mirrors and retroreflective vinyl, to challenge perception and revisit protest imagery. Influenced by social history and the ongoing struggle for equality, he co-founded For Freedoms as a platform for creative civic engagement. Our host today is Emann Odufu. Emann is an independent art and cultural critic, filmmaker, and curator from Newark. His creative practice, spanning filmmaking and curatorial projects, explores Afrofuturism within Black cinema and beyond. As a curator, he has organized exhibitions at the National Arts Club, Mocha, Connecticut, Layla Heller Gallery, and the Liu Ximing Art Foundation. His current exhibition, Places and Spaces, is at Friedrichs Pontone Gallery in Tribeca. And with that, I'll turn it over to Iman.
Okay, cool, cool. Hello, everybody. Super excited to be having this talk with someone I really respect. And on occasion of this monumental show, I am many at Jack Shainman. Before we jump into the talk, I kind of wanted to give some context, thematically into the energy of the day, at least from the perspective of internet lore. So I don't know if you guys know. I don't know, Hank, if you're aware as well. Some of the many one of the many viral conversations going on right now is about a fringe Christian group in South Africa that's convinced that today, September 23rd, would be the quote unquote rapture. It's kind of become like an internet joke. It's like because people are like, oh, yesterday it's 1:23 in Japan, but nothing's happened, and nonetheless, I thought it was interesting that our talk was on the same day. So I kind of wanted to mirror and focus on the macro, the bigger picture that Hank's work speaks to, as well as the micro, the individual details within the show. So with that being said, if Hank, if you have anything you want to say before we start, you can, or I can just hop into the questions.
Well, I just want to say thanks for the introduction to Joshua. Thank you to the Brooklyn Rail team for inviting us to have this conversation, and thank you all for joining.
Cool, cool. So I'll just hop in. All right. So Hank, the title "I am many," it resists the singular. It suggests that the self is never just one, but it's always a chorus. It's always a composite of ideas and people. How do you see your works mobilizing this idea of multiplicity, and like not even just like representing the community, but embodying the fact that we are never only individuals and we're always part of a collective body?
Sure. Well, I've always struggled with the boxes that I've been encouraged to check to put myself in, and also the boxes that I am encouraged to put other people in, and been thinking a lot about kind of my ancestry and all of the infinite amount of people that have lived um, an infinite amount of lives, and organisms that live within me right now. And there's an assumption through my consciousness that I have some sense of singular identity or control. But I feel very clearly that there are many entities which make up the me, and who is in control at a given moment, and who the I is shifts, um, and necessarily. And also, it's not only the things that are going on within me, it's all the memories, the experiences that my life has contained with so many other people who've uh, shaped me in ways invisible to them, and sometimes invisible to me. So I'm really wanting to encourage myself and everyone to really acknowledge and that we contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman said in his famous poem, "I Song of Myself." And in my work, I tend to show my multitudes by working in a variety of mediums and presenting ideas and moments in time in various different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly a perfect segue to kind of honestly my next question. And so, like, one kind of piggybacking off this idea of multitude, specifically in terms of like creative forms and mediums, the show brings together so many different arcs of your practice, from, obviously the retroreflective works to your quills to sculpture, and it really is kind of a survey of your evolution. But there's also like certain series that I saw that that are you're widely known for, but maybe were not necessarily represented in this specific show. So I was curious about how did you decide which bodies of work to include and which you wanted to not have as part of this specific story, and why do you feel that the pieces that you actually chose best speak to where you are as an artist in the current moment?
Well, you tell me what's missing.
So I think like I didn't see the branded, unbranded pieces. And obviously that's like for me when I first when I connected to your artistry, those were really seminal pieces just that like I work in advertising as well. So those are like really important pieces to me. And I thought that like in your book you have those well represented, but also some of the other works that were in the book that you released a couple years back. But I'm yeah, those are but the one that stood out was definitely the unbranded branded.
Mhm. Well, this exhibition really is a result of the curation of Jack Shainman. Jack Shainman himself was very eager to do a show that he felt like was more encyclopedic of work that I've made kind of largely since the pandemic that hasn't been seen in New York or at all. And he really wanted to highlight the breadth of my work in a way that he felt that the new space could only do. And I think he did a really good job.
Mhm. Cool, cool. And what was that process like working with him and because you guys have I think worked on like I think have you I don't know how many shows that you had like but I heard there's like somewhere like 8 shows that you've done.
This is our eighth show. We've been working together
Yeah.
for 20 years.
What is that process like at this point? Like now that you guys, you have so many shows, you have this very strong and long-lasting relationship. What is the process like to
Yeah, well, I mean, I obviously um, have wanted to show what I'm doing, exclusively what I'm doing now, and wasn't quite sure what Jack was interested in showing as far as like work that was a little bit older. And I wasn't sure about how it all would mix together. And so I really kind of taught myself to just like sit back and trust the process and allow Jack's experience and genius to come together. And I was really only during installation that I was like, oh, there is a cohesiveness that I didn't see here. And I was really happy that I trusted him.
Cool, cool. So I'll just hop into the next question. So you said that America itself is kind of like an additional medium within your practice, but to me at least, America is also somewhat of like a contradiction. It's built on ideas of freedom and also histories of exploitation, and most times it's happening simultaneously. So I'm saying, how do you navigate that paradox in your work, and what does it mean to be an artist working with this American subject matter? And how does the current moment in America serve as a tool that you're using to reflect deeper human truths?
Well, that calls me back to this famous that poem that I mentioned by Walt Whitman, A Song Myself, where he says, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contain multitudes." And our ability to acknowledge our contradictions and to accept that we can contradict ourselves and contain multitudes is, I think, one of the most important revelations for any identity to become self-aware and to become active in its own making. And so I, in my work, this is a work that is a maze that reads, if you squint your eyes, maybe you can read the words America, and it's made with prison uniforms. And it's contending with the fact that we live in the quote unquote land of the free, but we imprison more people than anyone else in the world and have arguably done that throughout our entire history in one way, shape, or form. And wanting to kind of think about the maze of navigating to get to all the way through America, whether it be through the bureaucracy, through various systems of obfuscation, um, or just through um, the system as it's set up and who it's set up for. Um, that those are all things that I think about as I'm navigating my pathway through America.
Mhm. Cool. And I think like that's very interesting. Because like I think it's interesting how moments or even like gestures can translate between different cultural contexts. Like, so that kind of leads me to the next question. Actually, could we switch to raise up? Is that possible? On the as far as the images on the screen. Cool. So, in Raise Up, drawn from Ernest Cole's apartheid era photo, the gesture it kind of became newly resonant in the Ferguson era protests. And what do you think it means when a single gesture can like migrate across continents and generations and retain political charge? And I mean, I guess also, do you think that that migration maybe dilutes its meaning, or do you think it accumulates power in that process?
Well, this is a sculpture that is based off, as you mentioned, a photograph of Ernest Cole, but the photograph specifically is of a similar angle. I don't know if Joshua can Google it and pull it up, Ernest Cole miners, but there's an image of miners being strip searched or having a medical search in South Africa during the apartheid era in the 1960s. And in the original image, you can see an image of these men with their backs faced to a wall and their arms up, and um, they're in a clearly very vulnerable position. And I always saw myself gawking at their butts, which made me feel uncomfortable as a viewer, as a spectator. Um, and Maggie just dropped it in the chat. Magley dropped it in the chat. And I wanted a way to find a way to represent that image that gave the people some sense of dignity. And so I turned the image into a sculpture, but like a photograph, I cropped it at their shoulders and necks, and I titled it Raise Up, and wanting to give some agency to it. And I made a much smaller version of it before. This is a life-size version. And that was in 2014. And a few months later, I exhibited it in South Africa. And a few months later in Ferguson, Missouri, Michael Brown was murdered um, by the police, and it sparked a major uprising where the catchphrase was "Hands up, don't shoot." And many people, when I first got a chance to exhibit this sculpture in the U.S., um, called it the "Hands up, don't shoot" sculpture, and I was kind of fascinated by the fact that something that could, was made, an image that was made over 50 years before could have a resonance that I could re-articulate it in a different medium and it speak to something halfway around the world that was about to happen. And to me, it speaks to kind of the alchemy um, uh, that happens in the creative process and how images and ideas can change and shapeshift and change meaning and change potency and relevance throughout time in unexpected ways.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think this was one of the pieces that really drew me into your work and was like, I really got to pay attention to what's going on because I feel like, I mean, I don't think I actually knew that it wasn't about Ferguson when I first saw it, but then like working later in the studio with you, I found out that, oh, it wasn't about that. And I thought that was really interesting as well. And so which kind of brings me to the next question, which is about uh basically, I know that you've been in, like, as an artist, interrogating the idea of truth and what that actually means. And when I worked on In Search of Truth, so the way that me and Hank know one another is I worked in the studio in 2016, and I had the privilege of touring one of his in the Cause Collective's public art projects around the country, around in the U.S. in 2016. Around the same time, like that, like there was that 2016 election, so it was like an interesting, like a really a politically charged time. And but the work wasn't necessarily about truth, and I think in the process about politics, but in the process, I almost went on my own like journey of figuring out what I felt about truth. Like, and I think my big takeaway from this long tour was that truth is subjective. There's so many. There's no way to really define a singular truth. And so I'm wondering, Hank, as someone who spent a career revealing what's hidden in plain sight, do you think that truth is something we uh, uncover, like a universal thing that's waiting to be found, or is it something that we invent through the act of framing and context? And maybe even further, do you think art can ever deliver truth, or does it only remind us of its impossibility? I'm
Could
sorry,
you
that was
repeat
a long.
all of that second half again
Yeah,
as
I got
a
you. I'm sorry. Yeah,
statement?
that was a long leap. I'm sorry.
No, I just want you to say it again, see if you can repeat it as
Yeah,
articulately as you
so
just did.
yeah, so as someone who has spent
No, the second half, just the second half.
okay, oh okay,
Oh, you wrote that down? Wow, that's pretty good.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I prepared questions to make sure I was on top of my stuff. But basically, I'm just saying, is
You
truth something that we have to uncover? Is there is it or do we or is it something that we invent through the act of framing and context? And so it's basically, I'm asking, do you think that there can be is there can ever be a singular truth? Also, is it something that we can ever even find, or can we only reveal it through can we ever reveal it through frame only can we only reveal it through framing and context? And also, uh can art ever deliver truth, or does it only remind us of its impossibility?
I just feel like that's a statement.
Okay.
And I appreciate all of that. Those
No,
are all
but,
the
no, but
those are all the questions that I'm
okay,
asking myself all the time.
okay,
Um,
okay,
so can art deliver truth?
yeah.
Is it an impossibility? Is the truth outcome of framing and context, or is there a singular truth, or is there an essence? These are the things that I've been attempting to understand, or questions I've been asking for over 20, well, throughout my whole life, you know.
So
And
can you talk to
one
that
thing that's
exploration? Can you talk to that, like that exploration, that wanting? Because not everybody even is cares about like finding the truth. So I was wondering, can you just talk about why this has been such an important theme in your work, and about the journey and where you are now, because you've been doing it for many years.
well, I would argue that everyone does care about the truth.
Okay.
And I would say that it's probably the truth is probably the most contentious realm in the world, especially in the 21st century. We have seen, um, we've come to terms with various different truths, whether it be about religion or about gender, about class, or governmental structures, about political events, about history, about books, about media. There are so many questions, and well, so many debates and fights and even wars about who owns who is entitled to what land, who are the chosen people, who are the victims, and who are the perpetrators. These are uh the truth. What I've learned, since you went on the Truth Booth tour, and Donald Trump became our president, I've it's become clear that the truth is what one can get others to believe.
Hmm.
Uh, I wouldn't go as far as to say that the truth is imposed upon us,
Hmm.
but I've become much more aware of the ability for everyone to experience the same exact thing and through different storytelling techniques come away with different interpretations of either the essence or the origins of an event. You know, January 6th, 2021 is a prime example of um, some people seeing a riot and insurrection, storming of the Capitol, and some people seeing a peaceful protest or peaceful engagement where the government kind of got out of hand. And so I think that's why I'm so fascinated with it. You know, that like I could be standing somewhere and someone could be standing 20 feet away and we experience the same thing and come away with very different stories. And I think, you know, I'm sure you've had that in close relationships where, you know, someone interprets your words in a way and you're like, I didn't say that, or and or I didn't mean that, and and not even being able to understand how someone can come to they're living in a different reality than you are, and um, those conflicts are holding on to our truths so often can um, create these divides that these chasms that widen as we become more entrenched in our truths. And so I find this kind of exploration of the virtue and the value of truth and the hidden truths and the various perspectives on what we see as a potential pathway to um, getting beyond or crossing these building bridges across these these divides that are created. And this goes back to this idea of I am many, you know. Oftentimes when I'm arguing with someone, I'm arguing from a I, me perspective. But the truth of it is, if I'm arguing with someone, I am a we. Because and therefore we are one in that moment, right? Because I can't be arguing with someone who's not of me or in me in some way.
Hmm.
So as we see this polarized society, where we talk about left and right as if they're real things, these really abstract concepts, which force tens of millions of people into binary categories. I want us to acknowledge that, like this work of art in front of us, that we contain multitudes.
Great. That was an amazing answer, by the way.
Thank you.
Sorry. So I think one thing, and this is more of like kind of building off of work. We work together on people every day, and you had some retro reflectors in that. And so one thing, as I was struck me as I was walking through I Am Many, was there were like one or two moments where I expected a piece to be like a retro reflective, but instead the work kind of withheld it. And it was almost like the reversal of it was almost like a sleight of hand for me. It was like kind of almost disorienting. There was a couple of times, but I'm like, oh, this like I literally pulled my phone out, take a flash of a work, and I'm like, oh wow, this one isn't. But it coming to me, it was kind of it seemed like it could be, and I was wondering, was that intentional on your part? I know you worked with Jack on it, but was that intentional on your part? Or do you think about like the audience, how the audience engages with the exhibition? And because to me, it was like a good like when you almost like you expect something and then it's almost like withheld from you. And to me, it was like a cool moment where I thought it was like potentially a conceptual thing. So I was just wondering if that was some of these thoughts were going through your mind as you were placing the works and positioning the works in the gallery.
Well, the work that you talk about, the retroreflective works, for those who don't know, if this is an example of one here, where on the left you see an image as one would see it to the naked eye, But if you have a light behind you or take a flash photograph, you'll see that it's comprised of hundreds of other images in a collage format. And over the past decade, I've been using this retroreflective vinyl, which is the same material that we use to make highway signs and road signs or stop signs, which are dark unless you're in the car and you have the headlights of the car on and they glow. And I find it kind of fascinating to explore history using a wayfinding material. And more recently, I just also recognize that I don't say that it's specifically a gimmick, but I find myself needing to show people how to look at the work in multitude of ways and realize like that can get exhausting. Like to be like, hey, in order for you to see the work, you need to look at it this way and then this way. And if you look into this light, and I just wanted to kind of liberate myself from having to explain everything.
Mm.
Um, and so I started to work in more canvas mediums, with the medium of canvas and on paper, using screen printing and painting, and UV printing, in ways that I might normally do it on retroreflective, but actually in this case, just as I mentioned, on non-reflective materials. Um, and it was funny because I felt like, as you said, people who know are so used to seeing my work through this way. They're like, how do I mean, I'm just supposed to look at it? And that's just kind of a funny experience for me.
Cool, cool. So you talked about your painting, and so in Marching on Stars, could we go to that, Joshua? Marching on Stars. So in Marching on Stars, you move toward a more painterly practice with gestural applications of color layered over archival imagery. And I was just curious, how does painting allow you to express yourself in this moment differently than other mediums that you may use or that you do use?
Well, in this moment, I'm using um, uh kind of I'm painting with pictures, right? So like they're kind of like brush strokes, but they're actually brush strokes revealing an image. In this case, an image from the March from Washington over top of an image from the Selma to Montgomery March, with paint mixed in
Mhm.
with that. And I love this idea of painting with pictures. It also reminds me of my experience as a photographer in the darkroom where uh, it, I put and I'd expose an image to light and then paper to light and then put it in the developer, and this image would be revealing itself in these ways. And I wanted to actually show, go back to that process. I mean, it's also part of why I like retroreflective. It's like having this kind of revelation in the what I'm looking at happen before my eyes.
Cool. And so my next question is about another specific work, Roots After Bearden. Could we go to that, Joshua? Thank you. The Roots After Bearden, the collage fragments your own retrospective works to extend into Bearden's lineage. So I was curious if you see yourself as part of a genealogical chain of artists, and as an artist, how do you balance carrying that lineage with blazing new paths for as an individual?
Well, I first was exposed to Romare Bearden's work when I was in elementary school. And that's how I was taught collage. And soon after, because my mother worked at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, I became aware of his work in the collection then. And only as I grew up did I understand the real kind of depth and resonance of his work and the multitudes of issues that he was addressing through this technique of collage. Um, I this work here on the right side is um, a variation of his or interpretation of his TV guide cover for the television show Roots when it premiered in the 1970s. And then I've always thought a lot about the Africa America as identity, and
Mm,
wanted to kind of expand on his story of the roots in Africa to kind of the branches in quote unquote America. And I see myself, I guess, in a lineage for
mm,
sure. Or maybe through works like this, I'm trying to create one.
mm.
And I was honored to get to be an exhibition curated by the Romare Bearden Foundation 2 years ago, that kind of solidified that.
Cool, cool. And so also I'm curious, one of the like I guess slogans of yours, you have many, it's like I am many is the slogan, but one other one that really I've that's resonated with me over the years that I've never, I don't think I've ever asked you specifically like the inspiration of it, but love over rules. Could you talk about it's a phrase that's almost like whenever I see that, or I think of going to like the Brooklyn Museum and seeing that, and but what where does it like where does that like that phrase begin for you, or what does that the inspiration of that phrase that phrasing come from, and what does it mean to you as a conceptual artist?
So my cousin Sunga Willis was my best friend and kind of mentor, and hopefully in some ways still is, but he was murdered in the year 2000. And soon after he was murdered, a friend of his gave me like this recording of him kind of like messing around on a microphone with some music. And one of the last things on the recording was him saying love over rules. And I couldn't tell if he was saying love over rules or love over rules. And I kind of was fascinated with how these three words could have shift meaning in just the intonation of them, and what the message is. And I also felt like both messages are really powerful, potent, and relevant. And I wanted to kind of extend my cousin's spirit and proposition into the world after his life and his physical form had expired.
And also, could you maybe talk a little bit more about like the role of like typography or text? Like, I feel like that's one almost medium that you use as well to kind of communicate your message as an artist. And so I was curious about if you could just talk a little bit more about like how that practice of kind of experimenting with text has maybe evolved over and yeah, and specifically you mentioned the Black Survival Guide. I remember when that project like I think it was around the time of In Search of the Truth that you had a show whereby you had some of these works, and so I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about how text or even archival text plays a role within your larger practice, and specifically through the lens of some of the textual works in the exhibition.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely find myself drawn to text a lot as a medium. And I think because there is a way that I can use text that both feels like a provocation and declaration and a question and a visual exploration, a graphic treatment that changes our kind of relationship to what we're looking at. It's this in a way when we see words on a wall, they we're used to them directing us somewhere, right? Um, we don't have a choice but to imbibe them in some way. We can't like see words and not read them if we are literate. And there's a seduction there that I'm kind of very kind of drawn to and fascinated with how the shape or form of that text, size of it, can actually also um, steer the viewer in different directions, draw them closer, keep them at a distance. These are things I'm fascinated with.
Cool. And I so you I've this show is obviously one in a succession of shows you've had over the years, and I guess like looking at across that arc, I'm curious just more of on a larger level, on a macro level. So, what questions are you still asking that you were asking in your show, maybe when you were first starting off, when you first had your first couple of shows, and also what other questions that no longer matter to you that you've gotten answers for that you are or that you are no longer interested in pursuing?
Um, my friend Chris Johnson said that basically every artist is essentially trying to answer one essential question throughout their career. And if that's true of me, that question is, how does whoever is holding the frame shape the viewer's notion of the truth or reality? And that would likely have been my question at the beginning of this journey of exhibitions, and it was true when I did the unbranded series, the branded series, and still is true today.
Cool. So much of I Am Many is about honoring the unknown and the many. And as someone who has become a cultural touchstone yourself, how do you reconcile the desire to, disappear into the many or to become one with the community around you, with the visibility and singularity that comes with holding your role as an artist, as um, a, a person who is uh, creating ripples that affects the social fabric of art, but even I think larger than that.
Well, I would argue that everyone is creating ripples. Some do it in more visible ways than others. Um, and I think I have a very ambivalent relationship with the fact that I work so hard to make visible ripples, but would prefer to be invisible.
Okay.
And that, like, because I come from a photographic background, I'm used to being an observer, a person behind the camera.
Mhm.
And I think really the advent of social media and the proliferation of the web, the World Wide Web, where I think when I was uh, did my branded series, I was thinking a lot about how, in that case specifically, Black bodies are branded as a sign of ownership and what that branding means when a corporation is applying that to mass media. Um, in the ensuing years, I and almost everyone I know has uh, granted allowed corporations to brand us in for free uh, in mass in expanded mass media.
Yeah.
That kind of is pretty um, astounding to me because I think if anyone had asked me or you 20 years ago, like, are you going to give away all of your information to a corporation and all of your friends and your location and some of your most kind of private exchanges and experiences and publish them to the world and um, have total strangers know uh, more about you than people who live with you today? I'd be like, for free?
Mhm.
Oh, never.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And but for some reason, I found a lot of value in exposing and or exploiting myself through these corporate mediums. And um, I haven't reconciled that yet.
Hmm.
Have you?
No, I mean, I think it's a daily reconcile. I feel like one thing I'm realizing is that it's like the reckoning is not really a single moment. It's something that you're experiencing throughout your existence. And I think at times you're able to kind of get to maybe deeper spaces in that. Sometimes you're not able to. And so I think it's just part of the fabric of existing in this reality of whereby you're like as you said, there's a multiplicity. You're holding sometimes contradictions within yourself, and also allowing those contradictions to kind of be allow them not to like necessarily clash, but sometimes to just be harmoniously happening, even though they are contradictions. So yeah, cool, cool. Well,
Yeah.
I think those are my questions. Josh, I can pass it off to you, and you can maybe get some questions from some of the other the viewers that are watching this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you both so much for that conversation. I have a couple questions from the audience that I'll be asking on behalf of some members. The first question we have is, many of the works in I Am Many draw from historical imagery. What is your research process like in the studio?
Well, because my mother is a photographer and a photo historian, I kind of grew up in archives and going to the Library of Congress and, as I mentioned, the Schomburg Center for Research of Black Culture. And I've uh, kind of always been fascinated with historical photographs. And um, so I kind of have gotten images from like the Delaware Historical Societies, where I found some images and content that's in the exhibition. Some of it I found at the Library of Congress in person and or online. As I mentioned, some of it, yeah, it was like from the TV guide, you know. So there are various sources that I'm kind of constantly that I might hold for years and at some point finally get to a point where like, oh, I feel like I know what I want to make with them or how I want to make with them. And that becomes the process that a lot of like hemming and hawing and consternation about how I can justify this representation of this image or of this text.
Thank you so much for that answer.
Mhm.
Before I go on to our next question, if anyone else from the audience has a question that they'd like to submit, um, there is a link in the chat to where you can submit your question. Our next question is, in addition to making artworks that are exhibited in gallery spaces and institutions, you founded For Freedoms and often work on works of public sculpture. Can you talk about your work in public space? When did you know you wanted to pivot to engaging the public in that way? And how has your work on For Freedoms impacted your artistic work in the studio?
I have been doing public art since 2005. And uh, so it's always been a part of my practice. I've always um, found the idea of working in public to be uh, enthralling because while typically we don't know who the authors are, there can be a resonance with a public work that doesn't happen in the gallery because to see an artwork in a gallery or museum, one has to consciously go to that space to with a certain mindset to see and experience this work of art in a very specific way. Whereas with public art, people often find that to interact with it while they're going about their daily business and can develop a relationship with it over time, actually, as they continue to live their lives. And that is really exciting to me to make something that becomes a part of people's experience. Hopefully, something that brightens their day. It's something that helps them locate themselves. A reminder of their values, hopefully, or something that kind of can be uplifting and intriguing to them. That to me, and that's so exciting. So, for instance, the Embrace Monument to Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, which is in Boston Common, um, which is the oldest continuously used public space in the country. Um, and about 6 million people go to that park every year. So, arguably, over the course of a decade, 60 million people will see this work. And that's just powerful and exciting. And what I've learned through my collaborative projects, which and like For Freedoms, is that yeah, we kind of submit so much of our public space to corporations. Through most of the art that we interact with in public space is billboards that are telling us to go buy something or go to look a certain way, or try to look a certain way. And we don't really have nearly as much public space towards just welcoming and inviting people to just be and enjoy their lives in the world and the society that we live in. And I think that that space should be continue to be occupied by people who are living in the future. I think that artists are often there's an argument to be made that our studios are scientific labs of the future because everything that we're making in our studios is um, for the future. You know, we are in the process in our studios of making something for tomorrow, right? There is a vision. In order to be an artist, you have to be a visionary. And typically that means you have to be an optimist. And so what happens when you take the visionary optimists who are um, typically confined to their labs and take them and present what they're doing outside of um, the research arena, which is what oftentimes museums and galleries contain, you know, and where you put them into the public space and invite the world to kind of be engaged with it. And that's something that's really been exciting for me. And it's shit, yeah. And I think I hope that I'm continuing to do that in my studio practice as well.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful response. Our next question comes from Susie. Is there anything you are keen to slash have planned to explore through your work in the future, which the current political state of America leads you feeling wary in doing? How do you navigate the current state of censorship in America?
Um, how do I navigate the current state of censorship in the United States of America? Um, I am most aware of self-censorship. And again, I think as soon as noticed that I was a brand, I began censoring myself, right? Um, and because I have to now think about how what would have been my kind of explorations and materials and processes and ideas are going to be judged immediately by a public, right? And how they can be um, distorted before they even get a chance to live. And that was one of the experiences I had with the opening of the Embrace in Boston Common, which the experience of the unveiling in person and the joy and the beauty and the camaraderie across political divides and at different administrations is so inspiring. And then an image of the sculpture that was taken from a news feed um, out of context could spark this kind of online controversy that to many people seemed so real. Um, that had I not kind of had the experience of it in person with so many people in person, could have really distorted um, my experience because have now we now believe that what happens online is more true or more valuable than what happens in real life.
Our next question is from RB, who asks, Whitman's writings have influenced your work. Are there any other writers that influence you as well?
Many, James Baldwin, it would be one. I would say that Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Audre Lorde, um, Octavia Butler, Thomas Paine. I don't know, just like random, what I can figure. Yeah, if I can get myself to read something. There was a book I just read that was not good for me, um, called "Amusing Ourselves to Death" by Neil Postman. Um, which talks about how with how society evolves with the changing of new mediums, and how since dating back to the post-Enlightenment era, like we become every new medium has kind of become a tool for amusement at some point, which takes us away from um, deeper engagement. And I recognize that with a president who was a social media and what's it called, reality TV star, that he was able to use that medium of amusement to cultivate and amass power. And I now look at the current landscape with the podcasters who are now using this new medium to amass power and influence through amusement and primarily through sparring. And I am shuddering, shivering in my boots at kind of what just the devolution that I've seen in my lifespan. And the kind of our ability to have engaged in nuanced discourse. Because as an artist, historically, we were able to live outside of the fray as far as like on our day-to-day lives. Whereas now it seems like we're just like in it. And like, am I making art or am I making propaganda? Am I making something lasting or am I making something that's of the moment, for the moment, by the moment, to the moment, and will it be fleeting? These are things that I'm concerned for.
Thank you so much for that response as well. I just actually read Amusing Ourselves to Death earlier this summer as well, so thank you for sharing about that.
How did it affect you?
I think it gave me a lot to think about in terms of how public discourse generally has sort of shifted in terms of its aims and also motivations up until now. We have one final question for you. What advice would you give to a fellow artist today who is trying to provoke dialogue in increasingly polarized social spheres?
The Public Enemy's song "Don't Believe the Hype" always comes to mind for me when I think about that, because um, the hype can really lure us away from our authentic truths, our authentic um, missions and messages. And uh, at best, I think if we can have an honest conversation with ourselves, perhaps we can have a connection with someone else. And uh, I would hope that the interest is to articulate and communicate something that feels true to you, rather than try to articulate something that feels that you would like to impose on others. Because the resonance of something that feels and is authentic may not be as widespread, but I think it has the potential to be deeper and therefore more resonant.
Thank you so much for that, Hank. And thank you both, Hank and Iman, for today and this generative and thought-provoking dialogue. We also want to thank Christina, Noreen, Devon, and Brandon for their support in preparing for today's event. We'd like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art and Tiger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Laura Mimosa Montes and Rial Christian on the event of the release of The Time of the Novel. As is Rail tradition, now we invite you all to unmute yourselves and say goodbye as you leave.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
I have a
Thank
question.
you.
Thanks so much.
Thank
you.
Thank
It's
you.
great.
Thank
Thank
you, Hank
you.
and Iman.
Bye.
Thank you, Emann.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Go see the show, everybody.
Bye.
It's a great show. Please go see the show.
It's an amazing show.
So
I'm
beautiful.
coming back for the second viewing, so you
Oh,
gotta go
great.
see it. Okay?
Great.
Congratulations.
Thank
Thank you,
you so
Hank.
much,
You
Hank.
both.
Bye.
Thank you. I have a question, but we'll ask later. Don't worry.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
Congratulations again.